Thank you.
Man, okay. Now I was checking online and say you have worked with a lot of artists, Chuck D, Twista,
Yeah.
Tupac, David Banner,
Eminem.
Cash Money, No Limit. So if you could talk about those artists a little bit. Chuck D, how did you meet him and what was your relationship like with him?
Chuck is amazing, and back then the music was going from being more pro black and pro enlightenment into more of a party vibe. um sort of went from like Public Enemy into the Fresh Prince era, if you will, into the Biggie era. So it was more about popping bottles than black power. And I came up as a huge fan of Public Enemy and of Chuck D. And when I met Tupac, he convinced me that I needed a board of advisors, and he was my very first board member. And these were people that were rappers that were actually successful at what they were doing. Because I always work with new artists. It's very rare that I work with somebody once they're already successful. But he convinced me that I needed a board of people that were very successful, mainly to co-sign me, but more importantly, to give me direction and explain like where they needed help when they were coming up so that I could help the next generation of artists. And Chuck D was my first board member after Tupac.
Wow, that sounds like a powerful board to have Chuck D and
Yeah,
Tupac on your board. I
yeah.
know that would have been amazing. Now,
And
did
Too
Tupac?
Short and Naughty by
Oh, okay.
Nature, and it was my board of advisors was like an all-star. I still have a board, but it's informal. It's more people that I've developed relationships with that I can go to
Mhm.
and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. What do you think? It's back then it was more formal. Now it's a little bit more informal.